Hey friends, welcome back once again to my channel. This is Somnath, and today again the topic is the design pattern. Design pattern always remains a favorite topic for me, so probably this time I'll take the opportunity to talk about on visitor design pattern, which is very powerful but not that popular. And do you know why it is not? But my personal opinion, the developers who are mostly beginners don't have much clarity about the context where this pattern should be useful. So my job is just to talk about the context, explain the scenarios where this pattern you can use in your programming model. Let's discuss with some practical example that will be more clear rather than before you get into the coding part. I think most of you are aware of this kind of a workflow. Let's say like my fridge got damaged for some reason, and I cannot just call random people to come to my house and look at the issue, right? I basically need to identify certain authorized repair center, and I'll just give them a call. So from the other side, they will definitely ask certain questions like the model, the year they purchased this particular product, is that product under warranty or not, and what is the capacity of my fridge, so and so, right? So that kind of a questions I have to answer, and if everything is settled, then that repair center will send a service engineer to my house. Now in the second step, this playing the role of a visitor, that particular service engineer, right, will visit to my house to look at the issue, and they will provide certain solution. What is my job? Of course, the first job is allow that particular person or to enter to my house, right? Otherwise, probably he cannot check the fridge. So this allow is very, very important in this case. And the third or final step, probably like that person will check the information which I already shared with the call center, and accordingly they will just charge the customer. Like if it's a less than 300 liter, then let's say 550. If it is more than 300, then it's a 650 or something. And of course, they will also provide some repair service. And I think you already got the idea. So this is kind of a pattern, right, or workflow pattern where you can use this kind of visitor pattern very easily. So the big question, when to use this pattern? And the answer is when same type of work to be performed for different type of objects, right? In object-oriented paradigm, you can think of like we will be creating two objects in this case. One will be my customer and other will be the service provider. In this case, let's say visitor. And the task, I'm calling it as the same task, the same type of work. What is the same type? Because it's providing the service, which is the fixing the fridge. And different type of objects means the client not necessarily only single time, right? Single object. I can, this particular same mechanic or kind of a service engineer can provide the same type of operation on different type of customer request. That's why this is important, different type of objects, right? Same type of work to be performed on different type of objects. This is the context where this kind of a pattern you have to look into. All right. Now let's do the coding part. So unfortunately, I don't have any ABAP system handy, but what I'll do, I'll probably use my Notepad Plus, and I'll be using an UDL, ABAP UDL, so that you can very well can relate with your ABAP syntaxes. As I said, I'll be creating two interfaces. I said, right, I have to identify the correct authorized repair center, and also the service providing team needs to know which customer they are serving. And that in object-oriented model performed with some interface concepts. I'll be creating one interface. This is called my client or the customer, right? And you can very well know that allow is one of the method, and the second one is the provide info, because that customer should have that information handy so that they can provide that information once the visitor asks for. Now similar way, let's create the interface for my visitor, and his job is to visit, right? As per interface, his job is visit, and of course he will perform certain actions that we'll look into it a little later. What is important, if I just copy and paste to my ABAP editor, it will fail. It will give a syntax error because this visitor I'm using in the client side, but it's not yet defined, right? So you have to do a little tricks over here. We'll just make that one as a default definition so that it doesn't complain. Okay, so now it is a syntactically correct syntax. Now let's build the visitor class definition. So when I'm calling it a visitor, I just having visitor interface, I'll just implement. I mean, this is the interface, and I'm just creating an alias of that visit, because visit is not actually makes sense for the visitor over here, right? Because actually he'll perform certain task called service, he'll providing service. So it's an optional, but I thought to put a different naming for that particular class, because that is what they're going to provide eventually. Similar way, let's create the client part. This is my client, and what I have done, I just similarly I implemented this interface called client interface, and I'm just making an alias like provide info will be my info, and allow, just I put it as same as allow. I have created a constructor just to ensure like certain default values I can initiate during my object creation, nothing much. And I just made a get price as a method, because if I call this method, I'm expecting what will be my service charge, right? That is the intention, and it will return me the price value, right? So these are the kind of properties or variables which I declared, which will contain the data which I need to provide as an information, like the model, the capacity, the purchase date, the price which I'm expecting out of this method, and also the issue, like let's say cooling problem or whatsoever. Now one thing you have to notice, and that is I could use, instead of visitor, I could use LCL visitor. Technically it should work. Similarly, when I'm using the visitor interface, instead of referring to client, I could also use LCL client. Technically that is also fine, but this is not advisable, take a note, because by doing so I'm basically coupling, doing a tight coupling with my interface and my classes. Okay, so if this interface been used in other classes, let's assume, and for some reason I need to delete one of the class, let's say visitor or a client, for some reason, then these two interfaces will be unstable, and eventually all other classes which are using these interfaces will be also unstable. So we have to make this very decoupled so that it is more scalable. Okay, so that's the reason. Make sure we should not use the real class, but here we'll refer the cross reference we will be doing using the interface only. That is very important. Okay? So anyways, we have our if you are just thinking how this syntaxes are all kind of a green and white, because I'm just using some sort of UDL which I built it with ABAP UDL. So for that reason, it is the syntaxing are coming like this. All right, so now what is the pending part? Of course, the implementation part. Let's do that. Let's first implement the client, and I just added called so the constructor part is just passing the value as an input. Let's define one of the method called myInfo, because myInfo is nothing but the provide info. You can recall, right? This myInfo actually alias part of the provide info method name of the interface. So myInfo is just getting those or grabbing those properties and passing it as a structured way. That's the reason I just created a structure over here, right? Which I will be using it as a reference in provide info. I think you can relate to pretty easy, much complicated. What next? We have one more method called allow and one more method called get price. Let's implement allow now. So let's implement the allow, and what I have done, this visitor I will allow to enter to my house and they will visit, and while they're visiting I'm also passing the reference. This is important. I'm passing the reference to my visitor. Why I'm doing so? Because using this reference, the visitor can basically check the information which they need it from my site, and that is they can call this myInfo method, which is a public method, right? So getting this reference, the visitor can basically now have an access all my public methods over here. So one of the method is called this myInfo. So they can call this myInfo to get the details which they need it, right? Now the final method is called get price. So get price, what I'm just doing, simple, just kind of a text literal I have used. So kind of a string I'm returning, and I'm just calculating the price, that will be, which I'll see like how this price will be calculated, and that price will be overall text literal will be sent as a price value, as a string. We'll see how this to be done, the implementation for the visitor now. So we have just implemented the client and the client definition, client implementation, and we have just defined the visitor class, but we are yet to implement the visitor, the different methods. Let's do that now. Visitor has the one method called visit, so let's implement. Not that complicated. So what I'm doing over here, when it's servicing, what they need first, they first need certain information from the client, and they will be using this client, IAM client. How they will get this IAM client? By having this allow method. You see, the allow is actually sending this reference of the client, which they will use, right? And they will call the provide info method. So provide info is nothing but my info, which is an alias of provide info for the client. This is the method will be called, right, from this particular line of code. And what will get? It will get certain information which they needed. And now they will check the model, and they will check the purchasing date and the current date. If it is, less than of 365 days, then under warranty, 1 year warranty, so they will not charge anything. Same model, but the date is more than 365, and now they are checking the capacity also, right? If the capacity is 300, less than 300, then they will charge 450, let's say. And if it's greater than 365 and greater than 300 liters, then they will charge a different amount. So this is the task. So here I have just implemented the service charge calculation. So you can very well anticipate, let's say you want to calculate the tax of certain products. So products are different, but you need to calculate the taxes, right? So that kind of a thing you think through. So the tax calculation is a same type of work, and you want to perform on different type of products. So it's there also, this visitor pattern is very handy, right? So this is all we just have to implement. Now what next? Just the final piece of code, all those methods. Let's do that. Let's build the object now. So I'm creating a client, and I'm just using the constructor model so that I'm passing certain default values of my page, and I'll get a client object. So next is what? The client will allow the visitor. They are creating a visitor instance, right? They're getting a visitor instance. So here the visitor can be different, right? So not necessarily same mechanic I have to call. So any mechanic who are having this type of interface implemented, that's why how I told you, allowing and also the identifying the authorized repair. So identifying will be only those classes I'll call where this visitor interface is implemented. That way that particular class or object will be considered as a visitor, right? Any of the other objects will not be considered as a visitor. So that's how the interface plays a very important role over here. You can very well understand, I guess. So this is the visitor. I'm just taking as an input, or rather I'm allowing to enter my house. Once I do that, now just I were to call the get price method. So which is my, as a client I'll call the get price, and you very well understand this is the method will be called, and that way they will just get this text literal executed, and you will get some sort of an outcome like this. So here as per the size and the purchase year, you see the service charge calculated as $0 because it's the same year, and there is no kind of I mean to say the product is still under warranty. It's not covered more than a year. If it's 2016 but the model size is 275, the charge is $450, and if it's a 375 liter on the same purchasing year but still the purchasing and service charge is quite higher, it's $100 extra, which is $550. So that is kind of a report outcome. You'll also see if you execute this kind of a code from your ABAP editor from EC38. That's all. I believe now you are getting a good idea about where to use this kind of a visitor pattern, and I'm pretty sure you'll be confidently able to use it in your ABAP programming model. Thanks for watching. We'll again connect soon. Until then, goodbye.